for the last couple of years, I was translating the work of female fighters in the LTTE, or the Liberation Tigers, and or what they call the Tamil Tigers. And a lot of the women were poets, and it was very interesting to watch, because from the outside, when you look at the female fighter, when you look at the guerrilla, the general perception is that they were forced to join it, they were brainwashed, or these women, they just came to the tigers because they wanted protection. And very often the agency of the female fighter, the fact that they have their own agenda, the fact that they have their own political outlook, the fact that they are there, part of an armed movement to achieve something, I think that really got lost in the larger narrative about them, because we were so excited. In one sense, people were essentializing because they were women with guns, but they were also patronizing because they were women with guns. And nobody was looking at the extent of how did women choose to deploy violence. And then I really felt like, how do you understand what they were thinking? Because how do you prove this point? Like, you might know from anecdote, you might know from interview, but how do you really prove this point that they had a political purpose and they were not somebody else's puppets? And then I looked at their poetry. And I'm going to read a poem by someone called Captain Vanati. Captain Vanati possibly died in the Elephant Pass battle. She was hardly 23 when she died. And this is a poem for me in which it really looks at the connections between what it is to be part of a militant liberation movement, but also be an extreme feminist there. And then I'm going to come back in a second and talk about poetry as well. This is a poem she writes. She says, "Get ready for battle." This is addressed to other women. It says, "You who have become a refugee in your kitchen because of the storm of patriarchy, you waging a silent war with fire, get ready and come. Let your self-confidence grow and your courage too. Do you have any freedom to act on your thoughts and your desires? Family life does not exist for the have-nots now. This is what has continued into the 20th century. Like the dreams of someone mute, your emotions now run silent. You sob in the kitchen as you're being wrapped. Get ready and come away. Let us create a new era in the shadow of the guns we now carry. When we get national freedom that we desire so deeply, we will build the tomb for women's exploitation. We will dig the graves for society's backward ideas. For this revolution tomorrow, you must come today. Look, there in a flood of blood, your sister holding her gun out to you. Take her weapon, walk in her footsteps." So on the one hand, for me, this, not just this poem, but the entire body of work of female tigers, why were they using poetry? They could have just written a manifesto, they could have, addressed conferences, but in some ways, poetry became the way women were using it as an op-ed. They want to talk about superpowers, they want to talk about imperialism, they want to talk about patriarchy. Then poetry becomes the way in which, they're going to editorialize themselves. Poetry became the way in which they were, setting forth their manifesto. So poetry became a lot of things that society would not allow them to operate. Society would not put them in charge of the, intelligence wing, or society would not put them in charge of, even though they did a lot, but this is how they subversively found their own space, which is why I think that, women poets, especially guerrilla women poets, have been so spectacular in what they have done with poetry.